As with every family, there are often differences of opinion when it comes to politics, not just in the US, but everywhere in the world. But what happens when you're from the Trump family itself?
Well, let's find out now. We can speak to Fred Trump III, who is the nephew of Donald Trump. He's also an author and advocate for people with severe disabilities. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, Fred. Are you voting for your uncle?
I'm sorry?
Are you voting for your uncle?
I voted for Kamala Harris this morning at around 6 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time, the U.S.
And would you like to tell us why you've decided not to vote for your uncle then?
Well, I've always voted Democrat. And since my first national election in Jimmy Carter versus Ronald Reagan in 1980. So I have always agreed with Democratic policies and principles. Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were my heroes. Where Donald has taken the Republican Party, and I believe in a very strong two-party system, but where Donald, my uncle, has taken the Republican Party way to the right in very vile ways, there's no way, even as my uncle, I could vote for him.
So what do you actually make of his campaign then?
It's unacceptable to me, the language and the actions that Donald and his followers take. I don't think they will move this country forward as Kamala Harris's will. I also, as you mentioned, I'm a fierce defender and advocate for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as I've spoken about time and time again. In fact, my wife and I are in the process of forming a non-for-profit called WilliamsJourney.org. Regardless of which party wins, it's not going to be tonight, by the way, so don't pop the champagne bottles tonight for either candidate. It's going to take days, if not weeks. I will be out there fighting relentlessly for those who need a voice.
I was also wondering whether you could give us an idea of some of the earliest memories that you have of Trump. Well, what were those like?
Yeah, and many of them were good, and that's why people who have read or listened to my book, I actually do the audio recording of the book. It's a nuanced book. It's not a hit piece. There are many moments in my childhood when Donald was great. We used to watch The Twilight Zone together at my grandparents' house. He actually introduced me to playing golf, which we have done dozens and dozens of times over the years. So there were some nice memories with Donald. Unfortunately, he's done some terrible things to me and my immediate family. The last, when he said that my son should just die because of his disabilities, that's a bridge too far for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what sort of horrible things. I also wanted to ask you, at what point in time, because you paint a picture there of a cordial relationship between uncle and nephew playing golf. At what point did it all go wrong?
When he started running for his first candidacy in 2015, his very vile and frankly disgusting immigration language and policies really started turning me to wonder where he had gotten such cruelty. And, it affected, again, my family. We had dead animals thrown on our lawn, reporters coming to our house uninvited. We didn't expect that. We didn't want that. And unfortunately, his language has gotten so much more dark over the years. And it's culminating now. And, you probably heard about the Madison Square Garden rally last week. That was his opportunity to maybe change his tone at the very end of the campaign to say, okay, I've said all of these things, but I really could be the one to bring us together and have some excellent speakers there. Now, he chose to just keep going and dial up the hatred, which is unfortunately, and as a family member, frankly, very embarrassing.
Well, speaking of his tone, how much of the young Trump do you see in Trump the president and Trump the presidential candidate? And has that really changed a lot over the years?
Donald always needed to win. And when he was young, my grandfather, his grandfather, really set the tone for him. My grandfather was a very driven guy. Donald always had to win at whatever cost. And having visited the Oval Office many times while he was president, I saw the businessman, the New York City businessman, of which I was also for 35 years, where he just thought, I want this done. I want it done my way. He had a lot of trouble understanding that, well, there is such a thing as a bureaucracy and you do have to play within the rules. That really bothered him. So if people are saying now that he's really amping up his you can say fascist or authoritarian, whatever you want to say, he wants it done his way because he always thinks his way is the only way and the best way.
So you're basically saying you think your uncle is a fascist, is that right?
I don't want to. People can call him that. I'm just saying he wants it his way. If that's a definition of a fascist, and if he uses the levers of his power to clamp down on his opponents, either legally or illegally, then you can throw in whatever definition you want. I just think it's wrong, and certainly not the way that this country was founded and based upon our Constitution.
And just going back to what you were saying a moment ago, looking back at your uncle's sort of career path, if you like, do you think looking back on it, there was a sort of a sense of inevitability that the political route and the presidential route was the route he was going to go down?
He, like many, my grandfather was surrounded by politicians in Queens, New York and Brooklyn, New York. I mean, that's just the way business got done when my grandfather was at the height of his game. Donald was always interested in politics, as was I. I had the pleasure of working with Geraldine Ferraro back in 1983. So I've been involved in politics. In fact, certain family members have said I should have been the one to get involved. But Donald always had his pulse on what was going on. And he toyed with running in 2011 when Mitt Romney was in there, but he didn't. It was, and I detail this in the book, at the Correspondents' Dinner, I believe it was 2011, when Barack Obama was being roasted and then Obama had his chance and he really went after Donald. And I'm actually sitting in the room right now where I turned to my wife watching that saying, Obama just awoke in the sleeping giant. And Donald was humiliated that night. And that's one thing he just cannot tolerate. And I firmly believe that's when he was going to full on run for president, as he started to do in 2015.
Well, talk us through your thoughts if he does win the election. What would a second term of the Trump administration mean for America in your mind?
Well, as we say here, the pundits say, and probably where you are and around the world, at least nobody thought, and I certainly didn't, that Donald would turn out the way he was. He actually was lonely in the White House. He understood the power but didn't know how to use it. But he surrounded himself with fairly decent people. I mean, General Kelly, General Mattis, General Milley, as we call them here, they were the guardrails. Now there are no guardrails. You're going to have Stephen Miller in charge of immigration. I mean, God forbid Rudy Giuliani comes back in. Robert Kennedy Jr., who I have met. I met his mother, and as I said, Bobby Kennedy was my childhood hero. Just people who will kowtow to anything Donald says, and they have their own mission too. They're going to follow Donald, but they've got their own plans and schemes in their minds of what they want to do. And I think it's, as I said before, Project 2025, which you've probably either read or you know about, is going to take this country backward to a very dark time. And that's truly one of the reasons I voted for Kamala Harris. She's will move the country forward. We still have issues. There's no doubt about it. But I will say this, America is a great country. To say make America great again, no. America is a great country. We have issues. I think many of them will be solved under a Harris-Walz administration. I look forward to playing any part I possibly can. But as I said, win or lose, whoever it is, I will be out there relentlessly advocating on behalf of people with disabilities.
Do you maintain dialogue with your uncle? And when was the last time you spoke?
The last time we had any communication was after the release date was set for the book. And the family, Donald and his kids, put out a statement basically saying it was all lies, which of course is not true. But the last communication I had was the night of the first assassination attempt, when I emailed his assistant, who I've known for several years, and said, Lisa, my wife, Lisa and I and the kids wish Donald well and hope he's okay. Please pass along that message. And she got back to me within a half hour and said, will do. So that was it. It was not a personal phone call, but it was an email directed towards him. And I truly hope he got it. And again, thankfully, he was not injured severely.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there, of course, is a deep family rift there. But aside from your sister, is there anyone else in the anti-Donald Trump camp?
I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone, but I can tell you that Donald's sister, Marianne, my aunt, and her son early on wanted to write an op-ed to the New York Times in 2015-16, saying that Donald was not qualified, either mentally, I mean, just in terms of knowledge and temperament to be president. So again, I won't speak on behalf of David Desmond, my cousin, but that was absolutely the thoughts of Donald's older sister, Marianne, and her son, David.
Okay. And I just want to ask you quickly about your sister, Mary, because, of course, she's also a really outspoken critic of your Uncle Donald. And one of the things she said is, quote, he's clearly racist. I just wondered what you make of that comment, because that's quite a powerful thing to say.
I'm just going to... I try not to answer questions about her book or her thoughts. I'll say two things. Mary doesn't know Donald personally, really. She probably has said 5 words to him in the past 30 some odd years. Second, I don't know if she was ever around him when he would say a racist thing. I was, and I say it in the book also, when he used the N-word twice in my presence. So that was disturbing enough as a 10-year-old. And this was when someone had slashed the roof of his Eldorado car. To me, the issue was that he never knew who did it. He just assumed it was someone that was black. So to me, that just raises suspicions that why would he think it was, I mean, it couldn't have been a white guy or a Spanish guy that did that. No, he automatically went to black folks. And then again, you know, with the Central Park Five, I don't know if you're fully aware of that, back in 2019, when 5 young black men were accused of basically raping and attacking a woman in Central Park, he put out a full-page ad saying that they should just be executed without having any knowledge of the case. In fact, they were all exonerated years later. So if that makes him a racist, so be it.
Fred Trump III, thank you so much for speaking to us here at Al Arabiya News.